So welcome to the North American Fruit Explorers 2024 annual virtual conference. My name is Chris Homanix. I'm the Vice President of North American Fruit Explorers, or NAFEX is short, and I will be facilitating this session with Alison, and Alison will be talking about integrated pest management, which she'll get into what that is all about. Before I introduce her, I'd like to share a few housekeeping items and a little about NAFEX as we let more people filter in. So first, this is a webinar. And so unlike Zoom meetings, participants' audio and video is off. And you'll notice that you can chat to participants below. They're in the chat window. And feel free to, to get the ball rolling. Feel free to, post where you're from. Just ask that you keep it civil and respectful. And they keep the comments positive, as you normally do. So second, we encourage you to ask questions, and you can do that in the Q&A tab that's up above or on the side of your Zoom window. Feel free to ask topical questions. If you have technical questions, you can either put that in the chat, something's not working or something like that. You can put that in the Q&A, but it's probably better in the chat so more people can see it and maybe one of your fellow participants can answer. So finally, we are recording this, and it will be made to members like you after the conference. It takes about a week or so. And you'll be able to get that at nafex.org, and you'll also be able to get any of the bonus resources like presenters that wish to share their presentation or other files or content. And then after a year, it will go up on our YouTube page. So a little message about what NAFEX is. So we were founded in 1967 as North American Fruit Explorers. We're a network of individuals that are throughout the United States and Canada, devoted to the discovery, cultivation, and appreciation of superior varieties of fruits and nuts. NAFEX members share ideas, information, experiences, and fruit propagating material via our website, social media channels, mostly Facebook and Instagram, fruit-specific interest group meetings, and our annual conference, just like this one, whether in person or online or both. We would like to return to online conferences, or we'd like to return back to in-person conferences in the future. So as a paid NAFEX member, you receive 4 editions quarterly of our Pomona Journal each year, and you have the ability to search the last 50 years of Pomonas in our digital library. And if you haven't done that, I really do suggest going back and looking. There's a lot of really great content. We also have a directory, some of you know, that shows the current published data for the parents of a lot of different common and uncommon apples and pears. And that was put online by our webmaster and friend, Eric Bina. And so if you want to learn more, just go to nafex.org, which you probably already have, but go search around, dig around for a while if you haven't, and you're going to find a lot of cool stuff. So anyway, I'm going to move on to Alison, and I'm pleased to introduce Alison. She runs Sound Horticulture, which works with businesses to find biological, ecological solutions to their pest and disease issues. And she can speak more to that here in a minute. I'd like to encourage you to ask questions during the presentation, so she can share some more knowledge with us today. Anyway, Alison, would you like to take it away?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm just really happy to be here. I'm going to go ahead and hit the screen share now. Great. Well, I just really want to reiterate a thank you as well to Chris for tracking me down. I have to remember how that happened, but I'm just really pleased to be here, and I'm very excited to learn more about your group. And it just seems like an amazing group of people. I had to kind of shut down some other windows, but it looked like people were coming in from all over the place, including even, Eastern Canada. And I was just out there in Guelph. So hi, everybody out in Ontario, and likewise. So This is going to be tough, this presentation for me, because it's kind of a broad overview. And so I'm sure I'm not going to be able to hit on everything. And I'm certainly not the expert that some of you are on many of, the technical details of certain pests in your particular area. So I am from the Pacific Northwest up here in Washington State. And yeah, I just wanted to say, gosh, this is only the beginning, I hope, of my relationship with each of you. We are all in this together. Um, this presentation is really about saving the planet. We're going to cover some real basic tenets of conservation biocontrol, but really focus on a few crops, which you probably are aware of: strawberry, blueberries, apples, wine grapes, and just touch on hops and a little bit with hazelnuts. I know that's kind of a regional thing. So put on your thinking caps. I'm hoping comes out of this presentation for you is that you get an opportunity to think about some of these pests and how they might overlap onto your crops if they're slightly different berries or orchard fruit or stone fruit. So I've got a lot to learn about it. I'll share a little bit of my history. My experiences are kind of a combination of things. I come from the wholesale nursery background and started a nursery back in 1981 and grew a lot of herbs. My thing was propagation, mostly soft plants, not as much woody material. But over time, I grew the business to where I could hit a plateau, and I started answering questions for other people. And that jumped me into blueberries. So that was working with actually compost teas, compost extracts, soil quality and stuff. So I could go into that quite a bit, but that's a whole nother discussion. We'll hit on that a little bit today. Um, but this is really a combination of my experiences, what had happened after that in some fruit tree, hazelnut, so forth in these crops. And it's also a combination. I'm going to include some slides here from a company called Bio Bee, and they are pretty interesting. They're an international, let's see if I get my slides to progress. They're an international group out of Israel, and they actually have been really leading the brigade on a lot of biological control in tree fruit in Eastern Washington. So they're good friends. We've become quite well associated, and anyway, they they jumped in and offered me some of their thoughts because we could then combine some of the research from WSU, OSU, and then their field experience with some of these releases. So um, in a broad sense, I kind of want to mention here, like why are people interested in this biological management? Um, the large growers, the commercial growers, they are really grappling with how to weigh their decision making. Like, is this going to be feasible for them? They know that they're always going to need some spray tools, but increasingly they see that there are also biological sprays that will be much more compatible and suitable for them in their operations, and compatible with the natural enemies that they're trying to conserve. The question is, can biological control solve all these problems? Well, obviously no, but growers and producers are very motivated to find solutions that are much more naturally efficient than the outdated chemical approaches. So something more environmentally friendly, healthy for people and the planet, something low input, economically feasible, and then scalable to commercial production. So that's where the work is now. This is what everybody's working super hard on, and we're going to find realistic ways to implement these things. Because for the commercial growers, they're dealing with the regulatory issues with their pesticides. We look at biological control, and in comparison, these can actually be much lower cost. There's a shorter timeline to bring these new beneficial insects, for instance, to the market than there could be even with dealing with the EPA and registration of a pesticide. Everybody's looking at reducing their chemical residues. The market demand is increasing steadily for cleaner fruit. Climate change is altering things already in so many ways. The magnitude of this is really uncertain. So working with biology is really critical. Insects can move faster than trees can migrate. So and that's just something to think about. On the commercial end, of course, worker safety is really an issue. Increasing the flexibility of timing and overtime, keeping people in the field when they need to be there and not dealing with overtime. Pest resistance, there's so many modes of action with the chemicals, but then when you look at um, the resistance in beneficial insects, if we implement materials that have multiple modes of action, like some of the biological controls, some of the entomopathic fungi and bacteria, and even the viruses, the modes of action within those groups are so diverse that it's much, much more difficult for beneficial or for beneficial insects to gain a resistance and survivorship, with the use of some of those materials. So combining all these new tools is really important. It can mean a lot of things when we talk about what IPM really is. Um, as I said, the bulk of my growing experience is in greenhouse production. Gosh, and when we started doing this, we were just at the tip of the iceberg, because when it came to IPM, there was nobody else doing what we were doing, and we were trying to implement in greenhouse production. But these techniques and the broad spectrum of availability of beneficial insects has increased so much. I felt like back in my day, I was completely bucking the tide, and I didn't have hardly, well, there was only one or two like microbial things out there. So it was very, very difficult to implement these programs. Now, greenhouse growing is quite a bit different from production settings outdoors. So the key thing we're thinking of in orchards and so forth is really conservation of the habitat that you already have. So I love this slide because it really shows the diversity of what can be grown on the orchard floor. And here's some examples of some of the organisms and arthropods that can be very, very easily invited back into your system. And so, as you know, there's the ladybugs, there's the green but also brown lacewings, which I will talk about at more length if I possibly can. The tachinid and syrphid flies, these are not things that you're necessarily like purchasing and buying in. They're already there. There's work at WSU on conservation of earwigs. So I'm not covering that really today, but that's out there. Soldier beetles, spiders, ground beetles, predatory bugs, parasitic wasps. So you can hang on to what you have, and you can really encourage them. So how does that relate to other production systems? Well, here's a recent picture from a greenhouse out in Ontario, actually. They are producing alyssum in hanging baskets to move out and into their much, much, much larger acreage of, greenhouse production. And what are they doing? Well, if these were outside or if there were vents open, they'd be attracting syrphid and hoverflies. And there's some great research on this, especially as it pertains to, say, lettuce in Salinas, California. You could implement the same system in strawberries and so forth, but it's been proven now that as few as 500 alyssum plants per acre, like in a field of lettuce, can draw in plenty of syrphid and hoverflies, which can control basically all of the aphid pressure needed. So these are things now that are, we're moving into all sorts of systems with really bringing in the natives that are available to us. Now, what growers here could do also is they could use these nectar and pollen resources to support other beneficials that they're releasing. Oh, good. I did cover a little bit of this. So this is a Dr. Eric Brennan. You can look up his work out of UC Davis, and he's hysterical. He's really funny. He's very bright, and him and his grad students have been working on, for instance, like alyssum and lettuce for many years. But the numbers are all there. Great data on his various YouTube videos and on his website. So I'd encourage you to track him down if you want to look at 9 years worth of really good work with, planting intervals and dispersion of native beneficials. So this is the main thing that they were interested in was hoverflies, syrphid flies, these little tachinid flies that fly around. They look like bees, but you'll see them hover. So if you're not familiar with them already, go outside next spring and take a look around, and you'll see them buzzing and hovering over, especially certain plants, like the alyssum I just mentioned, Iberis and status. They like buckwheat, chamomile, parsley. So things in the umbelliferae family and yarrow make great habitats for them to come for additional food, for basically nectar and pollen, and that really helps sustain them. So then they lay their eggs in the clusters or colonies of aphids, and you can see a little larvae here in the photograph below of them just devouring. So these little maggots basically go cruising through colonies of aphids, and they just bite them, inject a little bit of neurotoxin, and then just suck them dry. So our little beneficial insect called the Phytolides is very similar. And so that's released commonly. So what is biological control, for instance, in orchard fruit? As I mentioned, conservation. We may do some importation. There may be problems like the invasive stink bugs. Okay, well, they've moved in, but you know what? So has their predator, a parasitic wasp called the samurai wasp, and there's another one as well. So for that's for brown marmorated stink bugs. So we're finding if growers can actually spray less, they're going to encourage these little samurai wasps. So it's finding a balance depending on what your system looks like. But these little BMSB, the marmorated stink bugs, they really can cause a huge amount of damage in pome fruit, soft fruits, peaches, apricots, but even figs, mulberries, citrus, persimmon, and you'll find them. They'll overwinter in weeds and that kind of thing. They're in 43 states now, as well as 4 Canadian provinces. And the adults will overwinter in various places, even barns and houses and dead trees. So the BMSB is like a huge issue. So depending on the level of pest pressure in your area and the level of influx, we may also wish to think about, besides building habitat for the predators and conserving habitat, using traps. So pheromone traps you can find. Um, Often black traps are found to be very good. There may be some need to, intervene and get in there and spray, but the timing of your spraying needs to really be focused on nymphs and the easiest stage to kill. So that's where you are. You got to go for those nymphs, and there's going to be multiple generations, so that's an issue. Um, anyway, there's a lot to be said for this. Let's see if we could look at what they've done here at WSU. There was a lot of good work. If you go to the website, WSU Extension out of Wenatchee, Dr. Betsy Beers and her colleagues have done a lot. And, one study is taking these, that photograph, it's kind of strange, but it's a big panel of basically a sticky plastic, and that's used to trap them as they move windward into the crop system, into the orchard trees. So this is, basically like a physical barrier, looking at how much they can actually reduce the influx, because they tend to migrate quite a bit in and out of orchards, even throughout the season. So they will migrate. What's been studied is migration at different heights, and the timing, and the best ways to actually exclude them from the crop itself. So maybe, oops, cat on the computer. um, it may be not as much of an introduction of beneficials as, in this case, excluding them out of the crop. There's 50 different species, and they all have slightly different habits. So exclusion netting becomes then a very mechanical way of approaching things. Some of the growers are actually using the netting and adding deltamethrin to it. So maybe some other pesticides now. But the gentleman doing a lot of this work is Adrian Marshall. So he's really the key researcher out of WSU. And, you might want to talk to him and follow up if you are really troubled with BMSB in your area. I thought this was really interesting. They're calling these ghosts. Put a ghost in your orchard. This was kind of just a brainchild. There was an article back in 2018 out of the Good Fruit Grower, and some of you may have seen this. Tom Haas out of Cherry Hill in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He had this idea back in 2014, and so he treated a piece of horticultural net with both an insecticide as well as an aggregation pheromone for the BMSB and hung that in the orchard. Well, he found that he could catch between 400 and even 800 stink bugs per week on this fabric. So now, after that point, there's a company called AgBio who's been working very hard. You probably know of them on coming up with like a netting material, and there's one out of Europe they've gotten now, which will hold on to this small amount of insecticide and the aggregation pheromone for a period of time and actually really act as a slow release. So the grower is not in there in the crop at the last minute, close to harvest, spraying for BMSB. So this is just one other approach, looking at the difficulties, the pre-harvest intervals that keep you from spraying, and anyway, I just think it's a really good idea, and I wanted to throw that in. Other things people are doing for stink bugs are working with various trap crops. These folks, this is Ann Nielsen's group from Rutgers a few years ago, doing a sunflower sorghum trap crop. So they're looking at the windward side. Actually, they kind of did the whole perimeter here, it looks like, but looking at the influx and looking at what they can do to trap the BMSB before it moves into the system. So situation is situating is very important. If a grower wanted to use this trap crop idea, it's used for many crops and many pests. One could go in and actually spray the trap crop then with a pesticide and limit the pesticide applications within the crop itself. Or they could use it really as a safe harbor to try to rear the samurai wasps, which are already there, trying to catch up with the numbers of the pests as they influx. So, you've got a non-native parasitoid, and you've got, these stink bugs, which are out of balance, definitely across the US. So I think a number of these things should be tried and implemented depending on the severity of your issue. Often it is a hybrid approach that's really going to help. And when we start talking about, conservation and habitat, I just want to throw in a couple of slides because it's so important to remember that the two main groups of plants that are going to be the most helpful to you in orchard fruit especially, and wine grapes and so forth, but the composites and the umbelliferae. So those two groups, the daisy and the umbel flowers, are the ones that are going to be the most attractive to beneficial insects. So if you want to really work on, like, for instance, your own aphid control, these are ones that will draw the syrphid and hoverflies in the best, which will go after predominantly the aphids. So with that, we should move in and cover strawberries, because aphids alone in strawberries cause a huge, huge amount of issues. So that's that. Here we go. Yeah, they have, a whole list. I didn't even throw aphids on here, but the main thing for the large scale or just outdoor production would be the two-spotted spider mites. But strawberries also get a couple other species of mites. They get the strawberry spider mite and the carmine spider mite as well. Chili thrips are a huge problem in the West and in the South to Southeast. So kind of along the edge of the US. Chili thrips are much harder to deal with. We'll do a little bit on thrips management here. Cutworms, lygus, aphids, corn earworm. We can't cover it all, but we'll hit on a couple of good things here. So yeah, aphids and the western flower thrips appear to be the main issues for us up here in the Pacific Northwest, especially because we have, a higher relative humidity. We have less, if irrigation is good, we have less spider mite issues. You may be, though, down in Florida, and your neighbor may be growing citrus. Now, in that case, you're going to have a whole different complex of pests, right? You're going to have those darn chili thrips, which are really problematic. They cause a lot of like bronzing on the fruit and lack of maturation of the fruit. But you're going to be dealing with chili thrips, and those are really scary. Maybe if you're down in Florida, you're also dealing with aphids, but maybe some other crops depending on your neighbors, like whitefly. So, um, just want to mention that, the more that you just allow the native beneficials to come in, they will be appearing, especially when pest populations are high. However, that's often too late and not prophylactic enough. It's not a preventative scheme, except for, where you've got good perennials overwintering and harboring your beneficials. Beneficials are most effective when pest populations are really low. And this is why, with biological control, releases of beneficial insects are generally done as early as possible in the season to arrest, multiple life cycles of the pest. So habitat, habitat, habitat. The controls for strawberries are actually quite popular in both high tunnels as well as outdoor production. And this is pretty much just standard protocol now for almost all of the strawberry growers. Um, I'll show you a funny slide though here. Um, yeah, this is what's going on. This is where we're going. This is an indoor production. A group we've worked with a little bit, but they're back east, and this is a controlled indoor. They call it CEA, Controlled Environment Agriculture Production Facility. This one is called Plenty Farm. It's over in Richmond, Virginia. They're growing over 50 crops indoors now. And some of the trickier things, of course, are as they move from like lettuces into berry crops. So, these folks are trying to figure out how many data points they can collect a day. They've got 10 million data points a day controlling this environment. They consider themselves climate agnostic, which I think is an interesting new term. And one would think, well, they should be able to severely eliminate in these tight enclosures any influx of possible pests, tight as a drum. Well, they might be able to reduce these things. There's no such thing. I mean, this is like a biological vacuum. There's a void. And so pests will find their way in. And predominantly here, it's going to be, spider mites and thrips. But what we're seeing is that some of these amazing generalist predators could work this crop up and down that vertical grow. And I pictured in here on the left a brown lacewing. And this is a really tough little long-lived adult lacewing that can fly up and down through the crop. And it's going to go after aphids, thrips. It's, the largest thing it sees it will go after first, but it will feed on small things like mites and thrips and eggs. And the neat thing about the brown lacewing, and you'll hear more about them, I think, over time, but they have not been in big production. But the neat thing is the adult actually feeds on insects as well. It doesn't, like the green lacewing, it doesn't rely on pollen or nectar in its adult winged form. So that's an advantage. So, the bottom line is here, we're going to try to predict problems before they happen. If you're in the greenhouse management, you're thinking about crossover from other overwintering crops. And really, making a good plan way ahead of time and keeping records as you proceed. So I wanted to mention the green lacewing because it's such a good friend, so common and really, really like inexpensive for the growers to deploy. So we use a lot of these throughout so many crop systems now. We deploy them from airplanes in crop dusters over potatoes. Their eggs, we mix them with rice hulls and, drop them out of drones. The drone work is actually quite incredible, and I'll show you some of that. These are voracious little generalist predators that will just nail anything that's walking or moving. The minute they've had one little meal after hatching, they grow like 500 times their body size and weight, within that first feeding. So they are quite voracious. They will lay their eggs all over your plants, and keep in mind they are nocturnal, so they are hard to scout. Like, you may notice them on a warm summer evening, just wild ones moving into your crop, but it may be very difficult to scout the larvae within the crop that is doing the feeding. And that is because they are nocturnal. They're very evasive and they don't like being seen in the light. But they're really awesome and we want to welcome those guys in. So, habitat is important if you're trying to keep these guys going. I think we're going to have to run through this one pretty quickly, but applications per acre, we talked about how we might get them out, drones, airplanes, but we can also take the eggs and we can, oh, I don't know if you can see me. I'm going to show you my blower. I don't know if you can see mine. This is like a little blower that could actually be revved up. The hopper gets filled. The beneficial lacewing eggs drop down through the hopper and we can shoot these things out into space about 16 feet. So this works for predatory mites and green lacewing eggs and a few other things. So it's pretty neat. You can really, if you can get a targeted application with beneficial insects, you can greatly reduce the release needs because you're much more pinpointed in where you're trying to get these things. Another really common aphid control is the Aphidius colmani. That's just one of the species, but you can see here what they do. They go in and parasitize the aphid, and those little those little ones in the picture to the right, you can see that they've busted out on the left-hand side, chewed a little hole. So they've parasitized the aphid, eaten it from the inside out, chewed a little tiny exit hole, popped open the hatch, and away the next generation goes. So they are incredibly efficient, multiple generations per year, and you've got native ones all around you. But even soft pesticides like soaps and oils will have an impact on these to some degree. If you do have to spray, at least the Aphidius that is mummified inside the aphid, those will be safe if you have to do like a knockdown spray. So they do replenish themselves very easily. Gosh, one thing I've noticed, and I should have thrown a slide in, many orchards have really come to the conclusion, and vineyards, that they can have a habitat, a conserved crop of plants in the aisle between the actual trees or vines. And if they want to do their very best to conserve that habitat, and yet they know they really do need to do some mowing and management, a great technique is to actually go through and mow one aisle and then skip the next aisle and then mow the alternating aisle. And then 2, 3 weeks later, come back and do the opposite aisle. That will allow for your, native beneficials like the Aphidius, and it's probably Aphidius matricariae in your area, but allows them to do a great job and migrate quickly and easily from plantscape to plantscape and be available. So when the aphids pick up in the cherry trees, they can just hover on up and nail the aphids. So anyway, that's just one example. I'm going to have to move along. There's another great little aphid control called Aphidoletes, and it's a little midge, and they're just adorable. And we've used these a lot in cherries, and in other crops, lots of other crops, but that would be a good example of an aphid heavy crop. So it senses by smell. It hatches out of its pupal form. It senses by smell where the aphid population is. Then it goes back to its nest or release point and waits for the females to hatch. So the males hatch first, then the girls. And the male says to the female, hey, 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 over here, I found a great colony of aphids down on this row of prune trees. Come with me. And so she'll follow him, and they'll hover around in the kind of the quiet of dusk and have a little like mating exercise. And then she'll just dump her eggs into a colony of aphids. And I'll show you here on the next slide. You can see, click, you can see that here's some eggs laid on an aphid, and they're beautiful. When these eggs hatch, and these are like hardy overwintering, when they hatch, they will pop out. And let me see if I've got a larvae. Yes. Okay. So you can see this orange larvae. He's blind. They have no legs. They just know that they're right where they need to be. So they start wiggling around like a little maggot, and they'll bite the legs of the aphids and they'll just suck them dry. So I really, really love these. Excellent for early spring control in a whole variety of crop systems. And you can always go to our website and read more about that because I think you're probably very interested in spider mite control. Um, so predator mites have been used quite a bit. I included a slide here from BioBee. So if you see that emblem, this is graciously shared material from BioBee in Israel, and they've just got some great photography and have done some great work. So thanks, guys. Um, anyway, the Persimolis mite is the main predator mite for many spider mite species, but especially the two-spotted spider mite. They do really, really well when there's high populations of pest mites. Um, they are the only predatory mite that will actually kind of dive in and deal with actual spider mite webbing. I mean, the other ones just can't bust through that. There's another, great predator called Stethorus. It's a beetle, which is, also fantastic. It's just more expensive and a little tricky to deal with. And we're kind of conserving that for hops, in truth, because there's not enough of it out there being produced. But the Persimolis is quite popular in strawberry control. It can be blown out through one of these little bug blowers, dropped through drones. It really likes high populations of spider mites, but especially big fields in California. And even some of these growers are producing their own Persimolis because they use so much of it. It can really help stabilize pest, mite numbers, and it's just like super competitive, even in price, um, against the chemical controls. So organic strawberries are not that difficult. Here are some of the other favorite predatory mites. So depending on your environment and the humidity levels and the coolness of the temperature and the time of year, that would dictate when you'd want to use different ones. Persimolis is a warm weather tropical mite, does well with higher levels of pest mites, but also can be released at low to moderate rates just to keep it in the system. The Neosilius californicus is kind of a hot, dry mite. It can handle cool weather, but it's used a lot where humidity is dropping, like in California, below, say, 55% humidity. There's another one called Gallandromus. It's a little more expensive, a little harder to get. That's a great one for tree fruit, actually, and hops. And another one called Phallacis, Neosilius phallacis. Phallacis mite is actually my favorite mite. There's not many producers, but I'd love to talk to you more at length about that because it handles cool weather. It's a prophylactic treatment. We use it a lot in the fall, especially even in wine grapes to kind of level the playing field so that as the blister mites and other pest mites go to sleep and they hunker into the cracks and crevices of the bark, that you've got a predator that's also there available. So as things start to warm in the spring and the temperatures are hovering around 50, that's that sweet spot. That's magical. Everything kind of comes to life at and starts to stir at about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So when the pest starts to get active, then the Phallacis mite is going to do the same. And I really like that as an approach. One thing I'd love to mention here is the use of methyl salicylate. Methyl salicylate is basically like wintergreen oil. It's an amazing thing, and it's being used more and more to enhance the natural enemy abundance. There's been a lot of good research. Dr. Jan Ali has done a ton of work. There's a whole journal on this. What's great about using this idea of using lures in the orchard or in the field is you are going to be attracting your natives that are already out there. And if you are releasing some beneficials that would be really attracted to it as well, it's going to help keep them in the area. So there's a number of lures available. We use and we sell the ones from Predalure, which are basically the top of the line, and they're great because they're time release, but they're fantastic for things like attracting and keeping your aureus, which is the minute pirate bug, various lacewing species, and many of those other um, larger herbivores. Sorry, not herbivores, carnivores. Anyway, it's odd too that they have discovered that for some insects, even some aphids, that the MESA or the methyl salicylate lures can actually act as repellents. So I think that's an area where these volatile oils are going to get a lot more research and you're going to see more. So, dig around for more research on that if you're curious, or reach out to me and let's discuss. But I just threw this slide in here because I want to mention that what is happening around our fields, around our production facilities, is so important. This is just my old neighborhood next to my greenhouses where every time they would hay, we knew exactly what was going to happen. We had 24 hours to make sure that we had control. We had either insect netting up, or were able to um, slow down the influx of Western flower thrips from coming from the grass, the flowering grasses, into our system. The other thing that is so important is bolstering, your crop with certain predators. So for us in greenhouse production, it was cucumerous mite. So it's a really inexpensive, abundant thrips predator. It's also a food resource for some of our other predators. So there's lots of things that can be done for, preventative control of huge influxes of thrips, because that's what they do. They're going to move. They're terrible flyers, but they will move easily on air. So depending on where you are in the country and what was blooming ahead of you, when those flowers close, like the cactus flowers in the desert, boom, up go the thrips onto the air current, out to Salinas, boom, drop on down, hit the crop. So knowing these patterns is extremely important for growers so that it can be kind of ahead of the ball game. And this is just one of the thrips, the most common, the Western flower thrips. So you can see they have these skinny little wings, and they don't look like they're going to be great flyers, but man, do they get around. And, for most of you outdoor growers, it would rarely make sense for you to have literally like screening of the fine enough mesh netting, um, openings that would make sense for you. However, some orchard fruits are really moving towards quite a bit of netting, but that's a whole nother topic. I'd love to follow up with you later on. So I'll just mention here's that I mentioned minute pirate bug, and just want to encourage you to look around. You've probably seen some of these out in your system. This is one that is purchased in, but they look quite a bit alike. It can be a little tricky too, because you'll also see that ligas look a little bit similar. But anyway, they go crazy after thrips in your system. So if you're a strawberry grower and you have a lot of thrips pressure, we strongly encourage the release of the aureus out there, and doing whatever you can to keep the native ones happy. So it is omnivorous. You can see it will go after most everything. Here's a picture of the little nymph and what the eggs look like. And those nymphs are like little monsters. They're tiny, teardrop shaped. The hatchlings are basically translucent and colorless. And then as they start to feed, they turn darker and darker brown, and then they just keep growing and molting. And they just pierce and suck the daylights out of anything they go after. They're actually quite good on caterpillar eggs and larvae. So they're feeding off eggs and larvae, but particularly favor, thrips and caterpillar eggs. So here's another one I'll just mention briefly, because you can read a lot more about it online. It's called Delotia, and it's a little rove beetle that's commonly used for thrips control. And these are kind of cool because they dig around in the soil and they're going after thrips and fungus gnat larvae in the soil. And then they also, have these little tiny wings, and they'll go hop, skippity, short little jumpy flights up into the canopy. So, if you're a vegetable grower like cucumbers or peppers, these are commonly used in like hoop frame structures and those kinds of crops. The neat thing is we have a bunch of wild ones too. So you may have seen naturally occurring ones up to like half an inch or even inch long. Um, so those are native. You want to always encourage your beetles, your ground beetles to stay in the system. So if you've ever heard of beetle banking, that's another kind of fun concept you can read about. Um, so yeah, thrips treatment in summary, it really depends on the crop setting and the timing. But some of the greenhouse and hoop house people have a lot more problems. So those would be people that would be leaning on like soil dwelling mites, the Stratiolaelaps, which goes after thrips larvae in the soil. Drenches of beneficial nematodes. Steinernema feltiae is often used in strawberry production. There's also cucumerus mite, the predatory mite that I showed in the hay slide, and another one called Swirsky, um, the aureus, as I mentioned, and Delocia. So lots of different things that can be done for thrips. Hang on, come on, slide. There we go. So blueberries. That's been an interesting crop for me. I have not done a lot of pest control per se in blueberries. Um, because when I first got drawn into blueberries, these were folks that were interested in soil health and building soil organic matter and reducing soil-borne diseases. So that's where I was leaning, and this was, many years ago. But when you look at the complex of pests in blueberries, it gets really, really tricky, and I can appreciate anybody who's growing organic blueberries. Um, let's spend, since this could be a whole day topic, let's focus on spotted winged Drosophila predominantly, because we've covered some things with aphids here, and we could go on for a day with a lot of this. I put SWD there twice. So anyway, SWD, spotted winged Drosophila, is a major pest now. And maybe it was even worse a few years ago. And perhaps what's happening now is we have movement in now of a parasitoid wasp, which is following it along, that will eventually, if people don't overspray, take over and start to help balance out this pest. But the spotted winged Drosophila was first detected in the US, in California back in 2008. It can jump from crop to crop to crop, many, many small fruits, as you know, raspberries, blackberries, strawberries, cherries, grapes, but especially thin-skinned fruits. So closer to pre-harvest and harvest, the SWD can become such a problem. This is one of our hugest problems up here in the Pacific Northwest. If you have crops like strawberries or caneberries that ripen earlier, or overlap with the ripening of your next crop, this is where the problem really builds over time. And because they're just going to jump from crop to crop. So originally from Korea, the big problem with this that everybody noticed when it first started is that, oh my goodness, we've got something here that it's not waiting until the fruit drops to attack it. It could actually pierce into and lay eggs in the even green ripening fruit. So as you can imagine, if you don't detect them early, you are going to have a lot of problems because they're going to instantly burrow into that fruit. So, um, you want to really scout well. Absolutely keep a close tab on really early varieties in blueberries, like the Duke. You can do some things to help. Really stay on rapid harvesting intervals. That will help reduce the egg laying. Keeping the canopy thin, really open, using drip irrigation. Physical barriers like row crops, row covers are used quite a bit. And of course, the extensive use of traps has been probably discussed at length, but we can go over that a little bit. The use of selective herbicides, of course, is still a part of this situation for most growers, even the organic growers. But it's so important that what we have to think about is conserving our selective insecticides carefully so that we will slow down the development of the resistance to those other pesticides and increase the survival and the ability and the activity of the natural predators like spiders and parasitoid wasps. Um, you know, keep them in the system. So spot spraying by variety may be one approach to that. In addition, the use of those pesticides is going to kill off many pests, but the predators you're trying to conserve is really an issue. When we kill off those natural predators, what we're dealing with is a pest resurgence. That is really a force to be reckoned with. So monitoring traps and lures are super important with this pest. If we use lures, we can draw in natural predators. I'm not thinking about lures as much for entrapment, but lures for natural predators. So here's the kind of damage the SWD can cause. You can see in the left-hand picture here what the larvae looks like inside that blueberry. So the adults are inserting their eggs into the young fruit, the larvae feeding on the fresh fruit, collapsing, and then just destroying the fruit. Entire shipments of blueberries can just be rejected at time of harvest, and if nothing else, downgraded, and then they have to go to fresh frozen or juice. So again, early detection is critical. But let's just review the life cycle on that one really quick. So you can see the eggs, the larvae have 3 end stars until before pupation, and they'll emerge as adults within as short as 20 days from egg laying. So you can imagine multiple cycles from early spring on in your system. Come on, there we go. Uh, oh, there's more to the slide, I guess. There we go. Yeah, and there's what they look like. Here's the difference between the male and female. So um, on the left, you have the ovipositor with the female. On the right is the male with the 2 spots. So if you want to see some really good videos for building bait traps for these vinegar traps, there are many. There's commercial traps available too, but it's probably just as easy to make your own. A typical bait and trap recipe would be to take apple cider vinegar, about 6 ounces, and add to that 2 drops of soap, which breaks the surface tension, using like a 16-ounce, solo cup, something clear preferably. You can drill holes around the top of it so you can have a hanger for your bush, and also entrance holes, maybe a 3/16 drill, or just using like a hot iron and just melt those holes in the plastic cups. You can use a nice string through that nylon to hang, and adding to that a little brewer's yeast is a good thing. You'll also see recipes really looking at just using cheap red wine or white wine. So, when you do hang these traps, you need to monitor and check them frequently, change them out frequently. And you can also go as far as adding yellow sticky cards if you want to monitor a little more carefully. You can take those yellow sticky cards, like a 3x5, and immerse them right down into the liquid. If you like, this is optional, but that can help you if you're really monitoring closely to get a better look at what your counts are looking like on your influx into that, into those cups. So anyway, there's just a lot to know about blueberry production. The situation in your area is going to be different than many other areas. There's greenhouse growers doing these in containers now. Maybe they have a little bit more control, but maybe they're going to have a little more of a challenge building habitat. One interesting thing that's come up in the last few years is this idea of using bees or entomovectors and this entomovector technology to actually allow bees to pick up spores of natural myco-insecticides and having them vector those out into the crop to actually make that contact with the flower, so that when the pest does arrive, the SWD, that they're going to be immediately inoculated with that spore. So there's a couple of different fungi that are being used with this. They call it BVT. biological entomovector technology. But thinking about like how many times these bees really visit the flowers can help. So if you are going after, say, diseases like mummyberry or botrytis, you can use a product like Serenade, Bacillus subtilis. Um, and there's another one called Gliocladium roseum. And I think the Gliocladium is of particular interest. This is a fungi that's not available in many products. One product is called Pre-Stop. It's by Lallemande, which is a European company. It's called Pre-Stop 12G. Soil Guard is another similar fungi, but interestingly enough, these are not all alike. So you're going to find a Geocladium roseum that's going to be different than the next strain. So do be cautious and buyer beware as you start shopping around. And if you're confused between the products out there, please feel free to reach out. There's a lot of these fungal insecticidal products now, many more commonly used for, thrips, aphids, soft-bodied insects. Some of the ones that, we like a lot, one is called No Fly. There's Bioseries, Botanigard, but many others. The No Fly is interesting because it's not as common yet. People think of Botanigard, they think of Bouveria bassiana. No fly is a different fungi. It's Isara fumisoraceus. So it's pretty cool. And these can be implemented as well. So we're going to move on though to apples. Got a ways to go here, and we're going to cover codling moth. So a lot of these controls are now being done in apples with drones. It's just such a huge topic, and there's so much going on here in Washington State. So, gosh, we've got about 235,000 acres of tree fruit. That's 59% of the nation's total apple production. So we grow 45% of the nation's pears, 47% of the nation's cherries, and we've got our laundry list of pests. So here's just a couple of drone shots from a couple of years ago going out over apples. In this case, it was for aphid control, so we were doing green lacewing. We discovered, or we talked about green lacewing a little bit already, so I think you have an idea of that. This is a nice little chart from BioBee, and they're covering, the main things here are the codling moth and the grape mealybug. So you can see here, there's some crossover between hops and vineyard control with some of the same pests. So we'll cover these controls first. So, there's just a lot to think about with each crop system. It may or may not work in your crop. You've got to choose the beneficial insects you might consider employing very carefully. Rates and timings are going to differ, by your area and your zone and the heat. Growers have to think about like, how are we going to get these things out? Can we do it by hand? Do we use one of these hand blowers? Do we use an ATV and somebody sitting on the back? Or do we hire somebody with a drone, or so forth? In some situations, we're asking also, is there enough food for the beneficial insect within that crop system? Or do we need to consider supplementary foods? And then, lastly, where do like lures fit in? Again, Washington State is amazing in that we have so much information. Again, I'd go to the tree fruit extension, the website where Dr. Betsy Beers, it's Beers, her information's there. The other amazing gal is Dr. Rebecca Schmidt Jeffress, and she's with USDA. She's worked on a lot of pests in this area, and I think you've just got a treasure trove of information there. They are, challenging the biocontrol producers to help come up with some of these predators, and a lot of things have been uncovered in the last couple of years. So codling moth, we know, is a big one. We've got the life history here, so you can see with those red circles, you've got opportunities to really, intercept this pest. So early April and later on in the month of September are the best times to actually try to do something like beneficial nematodes. So we've been doing this for years out in Hood River. And I was, glad to see that in Eastern Washington, this has been implemented for quite some time. And Oops, I've got an extra D in codling moth. You didn't see that. Anyway, nematodes are entomopathic. They are endoparasitic, I should say, and they are produced commercially, sometimes actually even within a live host, like a waxworm. So that kind of production system can generate a super high level of the active ingredient. The active ingredient is not this little microscopic roundworm. It's actually the bacterium within the little roundworm. That's the killing agent. So, there's a lot of different products out there. So if you start searching, it can be a little confusing. So depending on how they're produced and what the level of bacterium is within that product, that determines the concentration, which then also determines the application rate. So just keep that in mind. But these little microscopic, almost microscopic roundworms will easily penetrate inside into the the mouth or other opening of the larvae, and they work on many larvae. They work as soil drenches, but in this case on codling moth, it's sprayed right over the trees and into the trunk, and that way we've intercepted the overwintering codling moth before it emerges. So and then it can be done again in the fall. So this is what they look like when you receive some in under a low power scope. You'll see them wiggling around, which is good. If they're not wiggling around, they're dead. So if they're stiff and straight like little arrows, they have not survived their transit. Thankfully, that's much less of an issue these days. Beneficial nematodes like this have been used for 30, 40 years, and it's just gotten better and better and better. So I would highly encourage you to consider those. EPM is the short acronym for the parasitic, the nematodes. So they are used in many orchards. They're also even used on like wooden bins, any place where they could be overwintering. So here's a nice spring application of the nematodes actually being sprayed out into pairs. And now we're going to jump over to grape mealybug because that's a big orchard pest too. So what are these orchardists doing? They are using Cryptolaemus beetle. So I probably could have put that slide somewhere a little different, but grape mealy and vine mealy do jump back and forth, as you know, between tree fruit and wine grapes, or juice grapes. So this is a pest which it's really important to slow down their spread. They are slow to spread, but once you've got them in the system, they are very difficult to eradicate. So you do have some natural predators, though, that are already out there. You may have various ladybird beetles. The one in this picture is a Cryptolaemus. Dariocarus and Nabis are just naturally occurring, and they will go after them as well. Oh, there's an Aphytolides on the bottom left going after mealybug, so it's pretty neat. They like aphids, but mealybugs are related to aphids, so they'll go after them too. I wouldn't call them the be all end all or a standalone by any means, because they are a generalist predator, like it looks like a brown lacewing larvae on the bottom right in D. So all of these things can help. So encouraging the broadest diversity is what you want to do. Now, there are some interesting parasitoids that are out there. Some are more available than others. This one is only available in Europe. So we lean a little the ladybird beetle control with Cryptolaemus here in the US. If you're in California, we have another one called Anagarus, another parasitic wasp. So these things work very well together down there. So this is widely used, the Cryptolaemus beetle. I'm going to show you quite a few slides of those, so I'm just going to move kind of fast. So this is pretty exciting to see that once they are in a system, they will maybe take a few weeks to really establish, but after a couple months, you'll see that they can actually, they've done a whole generation, and they're now, because they have wings, they're highly mobile, and they're going to continue to move through a crop system. And I'm just threw in a couple of hop slides here because there's so many problems in hops that the aphids and the mites are the big thing. But I wanted to just share with you that, some of these aphid predators, like Aphidoletes, will be used in both tree fruit as well as hops. The parasitic wasps are hopefully there as well. Green lacewings, again, are mentioned. And for spider mite control, you're going to see, the same group of predatory mites that I showed you earlier, and the Stepharis, which I mentioned. And again, I'm going to mention those lures because that's a pretty big deal. And in hops, we don't have a whole lot of time for hops, but just know that, you've got a whole nice list now of predatory mites available. And when you start thinking about predatory mites in any sort of ecosystem, you're also thinking about the height of the crop and the density of the foliage, and then recognize that predator mites, are going to have various levels within the canopy that are their preferences. So their preference may be by humidity, or it may actually be by height. So in wine grapes, for instance, and hops, Andersoni and Gallindromus are two preferred ones. I'm going to take like a little break here and just mention hazelnuts, and discuss compost tea for just a second. I threw this in because I knew I said I'd say something about hazelnuts, because there's such an interesting and complex and difficult crop. I'm just stepping back into hazelnuts after a hiatus. Some of the early work we did was with compost tea. A lot of those compost tea brewers working on soil issues went over to Blueberries, and I've got a couple of big machines that just rotated back over to 70 acres of hazelnuts. And so if anybody is a nut grower and wants to stay in touch, I'd love to talk to you about what happens for us this season. We're basically over the winter actually going to do a number of tea applications. These are microbial extracts that we brew up. And we want to see what we can do to help build the immunity and build the soil organic matter for the soil system, which has really, really been hammered. One of the big problems in nut tree production is the sheer amount of bacterial and fungal issues as well. But the amount of copper that is sprayed in these orchards has really hammered on the beneficial microbes. So in the soil, um, anytime we hammer on the microbial biodiversity in the soil, we've done ourselves no favors. So I look at compost tea as a way to ameliorate and bring back in and re-inoculate soils that have been hit so hard with copper over so many years and even successive tree crops, that we need to build that biodiversity back into the system. So we talked a little bit about Cryptolamus. Wanted to show you a little more closely what that looks like and give you a chance to see what the life cycle is like, and also how interesting this predator is because it looks so much like the mealybug itself. So you can do a lot more reading on that life cycle, and just know that depending on where you are in the country, there's also this other amazing parasitoid wasp, which is called a Nagarus. So we can talk about that later. You can see when it's parasitized the mealybug. And with that, I am at the end. Oh, almost. I was going to throw in some cutworm things, but cutworm in wine grapes is really a pretty big deal out here in the West. I don't know where you all are from, but if you want to discuss that in more depth later, we can. They're pretty interesting little critters because they'll crawl up out of the floor of the wine grape grove and crawl up the tree, and they'll do this during the middle of the night and chew off the first primary buds, and they can actually cause quite a bit of damage. An easy fix to that is the beneficial nematodes, and there's a couple different varieties, the Steinernema carpocapsae and the HB1. So SC plus HB equals control for cutworms. And with that, I just hope to hear from all of you, and we'll answer as many questions as we can. And I know that you're looking forward to the keynote speaker in a little while, so I hope you get a chance for lunch in between. So thank you very much, and let's open it up for any questions that we have time for.
Wow. So, okay, that was a lot of content and a lot of good stuff. Obviously, we all in different places of the country have different pests depending on what we're growing and where we're growing it. So there was a comment here that John in Yukon said, "Lacewings do fine in 24-hour light, as I can testify living in Yukon, Canada, where that is the case north of the 60th parallel." And Sandy asked, would like to know more about your compost tea on hazelnuts.
Okay. Okay. And sorry that screen sharing didn't jump back. Yeah, I don't think you got that, did you?
It hasn't gone back. You could just make it
Okay.
full size. You could just
And,
like expand the window itself if you want to do that. Um,
huh. Okay. I don't know why it didn't do it. Um, but that's okay. I want to focus on the questions and with respect for
sure.
time. But you guys can always reach me at soundhorticulture.com or info@soundhorticulture. Um, and my cell phone number, you can text me, is 360-739-9095. And I would totally avail myself to you because these are such exciting topics for me. I really appreciate the questions. So the first one was about lacewings. I take it right, and the survivor. I didn't quite understand the question part. It sounds like quite a
It
ways
was
north.
more just a comment that they
Okay.
survive in a 24-hour light regime. And
Yeah.
then Sandy was asking a question about, uh, can you talk about your compost tea generation for
Sure.
hazelnuts?
Sure. Yeah, so that was one of the first calls I got when I was back in the day, still running my wholesale nursery, and people found out that we were doing this compost tea and we were using it as an irrigation technique for fertigation. So the idea was like, ooh, how much can we cut back on conventional fertility in an otherwise, kind of conventional slash organic nursery? And it was fascinating because right away we were able to back off on our fertility so that we realized that, oh, we're getting quite a bit of a punch here from the microbial content of the compost tea. So when these extracts are made, they're made in, well, there are anaerobically produced compost teas. But then where it's really happening though is with aerated compost teas. So in the machine that we work with, it has a fine bubble diffusion technology. I know that sounds kind of hokey or whatever, but the level of aeration within these machines, and they're made by Growing Solutions, is such that these discs are shoving so much air through the compost column, which is the compost column is actually um, like a basket full of compost. The aeration level of the diffused oxygen is like 9.5 parts per million. And so what you're doing is you're encouraging the growth of the most aerobic or beneficial bacterium and fungi that you possibly can within this kind of aqueous solution. So you warm up the water, you make sure there's no chlorine, you brew these teas for approximately 18 to 22 hours, and then you have basically like a batch fermentation. It's an aerobic fermentation. Well, what happens is every 20 minutes in suspension, the bacterium within the tea in particular doubles. Every 20 minutes, that's a doubling of the numbers. So it's pretty exponential by the time you get to, say, a 20-hour tea brew. So you take that basically fermentation, and it has been fed. You have, excuse me, added a catalyst. The catalyst is a mixture of things like azomite rock dust, a molten deposit, which is like the whole periodic table, soluble kelp, humic and fulvic acids, and some secret sauce of some botanical extracts. Um, anyway, I could go into more detail with that, but the idea there is that you're helping to grow this diverse group of organisms without the use of simple sugars. So you're really steering the growth of the beneficial insects or the beneficial microbes to the most potentially helpful. And this is why, even though It will never be labeled as a pesticide. We do not want to label it with the EPA because every tea that somebody makes is going to be determined by the type of compost that they're using. So we tend to like a combination of vermicompost and a thermophilic heat-produced compost. Many of these can be made on farm. You can actually test them and look at the microbial profile prior to even deciding whether you want to use them for a compost tea. I'd be happy to talk to any of you at length about that because I've spent about 15, 20 years working on, oh, more than that. Oh my gosh. Working on tea stuff, and it's just fascinating to me. So I don't know if that's any sort of an introduction, but you can take these slurries and basically dilute them quite a bit, 50%, 80% dilution. Um, and use them for all sorts of things. And so for building soil health and building soil organic matter, we found even in blueberries that one good fall's worth of treatments, multiple treatments in blueberries, we could actually raise the soil organic matter 1% a year without the addition of any other physical substrate like a sawdust top dress or anything like that. So hopefully that helps as a little bit of an introduction to compost teas. We could always do another talk on this later.
Yeah, maybe have you come back to talk about compost tea, because that is, like as you said, that's a whole universe. That blower that you have behind you,
Yeah,
could you grab that again? John
sure.
S. is saying, can you show your blower again since I was on the slides at the time?
Okay.
Thanks.
So
And where do you get that attachment from? And is that a Makita blower?
it is. It's like a little Makita LTE. This is
Mm-hmm.
an older model. I use this for we also have a pollen applicator. So we can blow pollen as an alternate food resource out into the canopy to help feed, especially the predator mites.
Mm-hmm.
So the pollen applicator fit on this, and then when BioBee came up with this pretty skookum model, it's not cheap, you guys, but this is like we're finally like done with the DIY, sort of the many iterations of things that people have come up with. And I really love it because it's got a rotary setting inside here that pulls down and keeps any materials from channeling or getting stuck. So you've got a nice controlled drop, and then you've got a speed thing you can do here. And then of course you've got on this Makitas are nice little blowers. There's also, 3 steps of blowing there. So say you wanted to just walk a strawberry crop, you could determine like, oh, well, Chris, you walk 6 miles an hour. You're boogieing through that crop. But guess what? You can set your openings pretty, you know, to match your footstep speed, shall we say?
Hey,
And then
Allison,
yeah.
this is Sean. Can you stop your screen share so some of the viewers online can see that blower at a little larger of a size?
Oh, okay, yeah. Sorry. I'm
Yeah,
just
there
such
you
a
go. That's good.
go. I'm just such a Luddite, guys. Thanks. So yeah, so here's the hopper, and here's what the blower looks like. Inside here is a rotary thing that grabs the material. So maybe you're using like a mixture of vermiculite and predator mites, or maybe you're using green lacewing eggs mixed with rice hulls, PBH. They're dropping down here. You can then fiddle with the speed and then the speed of your airflow as well. So you have 2 ways of adjusting. So that determines like how quickly you're going to be able to move through the crop. This is just an older Makita. The model does not exist exactly, but the critical thing here is the thread. Is this going to fit on,
Mm-hmm.
your DeWalt? And so if you have a list of like, email me and let me know like what do you have there already in your maintenance shed, and then we could determine if this thread is going to fit, because this is fairly universal, the thread system here. So I think you'd be pleasantly surprised that it's it's a pretty easy matchup to most of the typical blowers out there.
Okay. All right. And then Seth Doty, and I know there are, but if you could speak to um, some of the studies that could you speak to any of the studies that you know about that show that adding beneficial insects to the environment produces a statistically significant difference in biological control versus reliance on naturally occurring population of beneficials. I think it's not an either or thing. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. There are quite a few what we'd call meta studies. There was a group out of OSU I was part of for about 10 years until the group dissolved. They ran out of soft money. The problem with organic research of this kind is that every single environment is completely different. And so the meta studies are truly what's required to kind of marry all the research and the layers together, and that's pretty expensive to do. So I think it's really on a site by site basis. And but I'd be happy to send that person any research that I could pull up and send links to. And I've got a bunch of stuff I could download. The trick is, like you said, is combining, conserving what you have out there naturally, attracting other beneficials if they're, in the area, if you're not, in a scorched earth desert. And and even in a scorched earth situation, it's amazing what will come. If you build it, they shall come. So the idea of this augmentation, it's not about like, gee, let's spend money on bugs. It's like, what do I need here to build up the populations from what I have naturally occurring, which might be generalist predators that are jumping from crop to crop? What can I add that would be more pointed or specific in its prey search, whether that's a parasitoid or an arthropod of some sort? So, what can you do to augment to level the playing field before pest populations tip a little bit out of your favor? Again, it's like hitting things early and making sure that the populations match up so that you actually can build yourself an advantage. That's why I do mention green lacelings a lot because they're so inexpensive, and that's an easy way to kind of tip the scales back in your favor. And some of the predator mites are probably the two most common things that are done. When we get to the conversation of, say, Cryptolamus, they're quite a bit more expensive. And I think that's a case where, yes, you'd want to try to augment maybe your populations for a few years, but then try just really hard to do everything that you could to conserve what you've just, put into place.
That's great. Okay, so and Matt Soltis asks, and I think this is probably relevant for a lot of backyard growers or smaller orchardists as well. He says, I'm curious your best strategies for small orchards, say 1 to 20 trees, where some methods like beneficials, organic attract and kill sprays, etc., may be less effective because pests can live well outside the orchard and become a problem at key times.
Hmm.
You can offer whatever perspective you have on that. That's fine.
Yeah, I probably have multiple perspectives. I still think that, you know, building your predator and parasitoid populations is incredibly important. Um, if the goal is to reduce spraying, when you do spray, I would just say use as specific of sprays as possible. One thing to lean on if you need help with sprays would be thinking again about those fungal sprays, which are microbial biopesticides. So depending on where you are, what you've got, another one that I didn't mention, um, but it might actually be very good for tree fruit on a small scale, is called velifer, and that's a Beauveria bassiana. So that's, really common entomopathic fungi. But it's because of the EC solution, so it's in a emulsifiable concentrate. It's got a little bit of oil in there, so I think that would probably be very good for fruit tree people. I'll probably use some of that. I've got a new orchard here, and I'm gonna probably need to try some of that this spring myself. So when you have a little bit of oil in an EC on an entomopathic fungi, you're gonna have, a longer sustained wetting period for that particular product, which means it's not going to dry out and the spore won't desiccate before before you can make contact with the pest that you're specifically going after. These fungi sprays, I like this oil one because it's slow to dry, has a longer activity, more like 10 days to 2 weeks. Um, I like that one a lot. And also, all of these are really, really soft on the beneficial insects. So, for a number of reasons, many of the predator mites, they're crawling very fast. They're preening themselves like little cats. And as they do that, they are drying off. So if spores get stuck to them, they can preen them off their bodies before they can actually penetrate the body and infect that mite. There may be some impact on like larvae of lacewings, but because of the low cost of applying those, you can keep applying those every couple weeks if you feel like you need to in the system. There's more to say on that if you wanted to include the topic of like, well, what else could you do? Maybe there's some repellents that could be used. Things like Captiva comes to mind, capsimum sprays with garlic, heavy concentrates of that kind of thing might help ward off these predators or these pests that are moving in from outside. If that's the you know approach you want to take. I hope that helps.
I think it does. I have a question for you. So in one of my greenhouses, I deal with on and off leaf miner mites, and yeah, and it's kind of come and gone. I'm not using chemicals on it. I have used azadirachtin though, the extract of neem. That's been pretty effective. But I've tried to just build up populations of parasitic wasps, and I see them feed. And I think I've mostly got it under control at this point. There's enough parasitic wasp species, but could you speak to that, to leaf miner mites? It's a more I don't know which species it is exactly, but it seems to be a more general species.
Okay.
Well, I have a bunch of peach trees in big pots that are fruiting, and that's one of the things that they'll really go after. But they're on other things too.
So you're saying leaf miner mite. It's not leaf miner like the fly?
The like leaf miner mites.
Okay, I don't know what a leaf miner mite is. I know what leaf miner is. Are
Yeah,
you sure it's
they're
a
like
mite?
it's a mite. It's a mite species that feeds on the surface of the leaf,
Oh, it's
and
on
it
the
it ends
surface.
up like giving it kind of a translucence look.
Okay. And I'm gonna have to look it up and see what kind of mite it is. Its activity,
Yeah,
but if it's feeding just on the surface, and it's on peach, um,
it's on a lot of different. It will.
okay,
I have various different things in this
yeah,
greenhouse. So
okay. Yeah, and I've planted some pears, and there are, so many species of
pear
mite.
blister mite.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the first thing that like my gut says I would do is Amblesius phallacis. So the phallacis mite it's native, it's super cold tolerant, and like you could have like the smallest vial you could get is like 1,000 count. You could use that on depending on how big the trees are. Like if they're 10-year-old trees, you'd probably put 1,000 or 2,000 per tree. And you don't have to just sprinkle them up there. You could actually put them up in little release boxes and let them move out into the canopy. But those are very proactive. They're intensely, um, yeah, they're really aggressive. They will go after any mite that they see, and they'll be great for like the cooler weather. When it gets hotter in the summer, you might jump to Gallindromus mite. Those are a little harder to come by. There's a high demand, and they're very difficult to propagate, but we get some out of California. So Gallindromus is I'd go Amblesius phallacis and then move to Gallindromus during the heat next summer if you needed to do another application in the summer. But I'll read about it a little bit, and we'll be in touch. We'll work on that one.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good. One other one that I think affects a lot of people. I've started to see it a little bit out here in the Pacific Northwest but I know it's really bad in the Midwest some places is woolly apple aphid. Do you have anything to say about that? And I know there's like thousands of different pests, so you may not, but
Yeah. Um, Gosh, I did some work on this. I'm trying to remember. I've got some files on woolly apple aphid. I have not had to deal with it too much. We have a we've never we've never been able to get this product in any sort of regular continuity. But that brown lacewing, we
Mhm.
finally can get. I'm like, hallelujah. The green lacewing will go after woolly aphid. But I think the brown lacewing are more specific and can kind of bust through that, I mean, they are really weird with that waxy cuticle. And they're crazy, ridiculously abundant when they do rear their heads. I've seen wild populations. Um, I don't have experience with the micromus or the brown lacewing yet on them, but that would be what I would reach to. The other thing too is if you have a huge influx of the woolly aphid and it's like, oh wow, where'd those come from? I would start with one of the microbial biopesticide sprays that could penetrate through that like waxy heap and get into the insect and just nail them from the inside out. I think that would be a very safe, very sane approach to the woolly aphid. Um, I would probably go with, I'm thinking that time of year, depending on the crop. What did she say it was on? Did she say what?
It's just something I've started to see on some apple trees
That was your
here and
question.
there
Yeah.
in the Pacific Northwest. I know that like decades ago it was a problem, and they nuked it with I don't know some really
Exactly.
terrible
Right.
chemical that is
Hmm.
still there's farms I know of in the Willamette Valley that you can see the strips where the orchard was because all the plants are still stunted in the strip. What I forget what it is. It's a now banned persistent chemical.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I would say on that woolly apple aphid, I would start with I don't know, my gut response would be Bioseries. It's a wettable powder and it's the Beauveria bassiana, and that would penetrate through that cuticle. And I think as long as you could gain entrance into the insect, either end, um, you would see a cessation of feeding within 2 days and probably death after that. And I should be careful what I say about compost teas, but I've seen some crazy things with compost tea applications on aphids and aphid relatives and caterpillars where I don't know. I think it's the secondary metabolites or, the enzymatic byproducts of some of these things, which can actually have kind of a corrosive ability to break down exoskeletons and waxy cuticles. So, yeah, death be to the aphids. I don't know. Just a thought, not an EPA registered thing. I didn't say that. Boop, just erase that.
Yeah. Uh, you know, one thing that might help some people, Sandy brought up again. Can you spell? And I think it might have been for Bavaria, but if I'm saying that right. But would you mind pulling up that slide where you had some of the parasitic wasp species?
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. So if I go share again,
yeah.
okay. Ugh, it's just not bringing it over onto that screen.
You just have to if go up to the left-hand corner of the window. There's the three bubbles, and make it left-hand corner. Yeah, right. Keep going with your mouse over to the left, left, left.
Left of audio.
No, no, down. Go down on the window itself, the PowerPoint window itself. Keep going left all the way to the leftmost corner, up a little bit.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
you're
Sorry.
getting so close. See that the green circle right there?
Yeah.
Click on that, and then just it says yeah. Okay.
And now, do you guys have my screen now?
Yes. I mean,
Okay.
it's not full screen, but that's so well. Yeah, I think it is full screen now, actually.
Okay. Thank you. I don't know why I couldn't do that. Tell you,
It's okay.
and you wanted to see the predatory mites or
Well, that would be good. Just so people can
what,
see that again for a
what was
second,
that
and
other
then
list?
the wasps.
Ah, let's see. That was up under um, this one here, Ophidius colmani.
Yeah, there was one that you had like the four wasps, major wasp species too.
Okay,
I
that
think.
was going into lace wings.
I think it might
Uh,
have been the samurai wasp.
I realize, guys, this is probably quicker than you can type it down or write it down, but you can go back in our member resources and watch this video again. But I just wanted to put them up there or have her put up there for a second. Um,
Absolutely.
while you're doing that, Eric Bina asks, and I think this is an important question too. You talked about quote scorched earth situations. And
Mhm.
he says, how bad are neighboring conventional agricultural systems going to hurt my beneficial situation? If my orchard is 50 feet on one border from a standard corn bean rotation, are beneficials I'm building up going to be killed off each year?
Um, I guess the scientific answer would be it depends. I don't know if there's a hedgerow or anything, any sort of buffer between the two situations, but that if they don't have one, that would be a great thing to consider, building a hedgerow type of habitat. And for this person answering this question, I'd love to get, like, if they email me, I've got a really amazing document produced by ATRA, and ATRA exists no longer. You can't get really the publication online. I don't think it's that was the appropriate technology transfer for rural areas. And this was a government funded bunch of studies that were put together for conservation biocontrol. And that ATRA publication to this day is kind of like my gold standard, because it will goes through habitat, hedgerows, and also for each beneficial that you want to draw to the orchard, these are the plantings that you would think about doing for those particular predators and parasitoids. So I'd be happy to send that through to anybody. We could even make it a part of this publication being available. I actually kind of forgot to put that in there. But that would be one thing. Um, yeah, so anything, any sort of windbreak that you could do, hedgerows with shrubs and, taller things if possible. That's the first thing that comes to mind. As far as how much damage are those conventional sprays going to do, it's just a matter of drift. We don't know what the sprays are and what they're spraying for. If they're fungicides, they're probably not going to have too great of an impact. But it really depends on, did they really have any beneficials to begin with, there? Probably not. So it's really hard to say. You're just going to have to build your own oasis and try not to worry about it too much because it's kind of beyond your control. Um,
Um, I just dropped the link for attra.ncat.org.
yes,
And my understanding is that there is, under the publication library, a lot of the stuff is still there. Sometimes the links are screwed up.
yeah.
Um, but
And
I wanted to do one more question. There are a few more, but I just
okay.
this is a generalist question for myself to on behalf of everybody. But um, could you speak a little bit to your thoughts around using perennials and in agricultural systems as refugia for the overwintering of beneficials, and also a little bit about your ideas around beetle banks, because those are both really broad topic points as well. But
Mhm.
I just want to get people thinking about that, because I think that's a core concept in
Mhm.
really reducing chemical inputs or foregoing chemical inputs.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought up beetle banks. And so Dr. Gwendolyn Ellen from OSU, Gwendolyn is now retired, but her research was amazing, and she was her stuff and her cohorts was very much a part of some of these meta studies, which really looked at the value of beetle banks as being a part of the landscape. So I would definitely look back at Dr. Gwendolyn Ellen, Ellen, and pull up some of her stuff. I was also going to mention on the ATRA, if you go to that site and it looks like you have to pay for that PDF, just email me and I'll send it to you. Save yourself 25 bucks if that's what comes up on the screen. If you want, unless you just want to support them, that's great. Yeah, so the use of perennials is really critical, and I'm glad that you brought that up as well. So especially perennials like that are members of the composite and umbellifery family. Of course, those bunching grasses, like the fescues and such, will be very good for your beetle banks. Leaving these areas as undisturbed as possible is critical. And then, of course, like if you're looking for habitat for, leafcutter bees, and you might be also thinking about other solitary bees that could be helpful to you. Leaving open kind of sandy, unvegetative areas, just like little pockets here and there, can go a long way. So you can kind of start designing, a mixture of plants that you think will work best for your operation, your garden, your orchard. But definitely like good perennials, I guess, would be like rudbeckias, as far as composites, yarrows. Um, those come to mind if you're building more of a perennial system that includes some woodies, some woody trees that would be part of that, say, hedgerow to keep the neighbor's spray from coming over. I would look at members of, well, it might be a little different for you, but in orchards, but the wild prunus species actually are amazing hosts to lepidopteran pests, but they also bring birds into the system. And birds are really critical and kind of like haven't really been mentioned in this discussion, but bringing in the birds will also help with pest control on a much broader basis. So again, depends on the system and what you can afford to plant. Prunus is one thing, but maybe better for you orchardist would be another important host plant would be that birds would really like because of the lepidopteran species that it would attract that would maybe not go to prunus or to your orchard fruit would be the oaks. So there's some amazing work online. And okay, Dr. Brennan. Uh-oh. University of Delaware. um, I've got all sorts of work on plantings for bird resources, which is like a little bit different. And then I know that many of you know about Xerces and out of Oregon, that big nonprofit. It's Xerces, Xerces.org. Of course, they've got amazing funding, and so their website is fantastic, and they have all sorts of other things that you can do to augment habitat for conservation.
And
So
if I can interject, everyone who is participating as a attendee, we had an interest group session led by Michigan State University and the Wild Farm Alliance about bringing beneficial birds and raptors into your orchard settings or backyards. So please access that interest group, that video, if you would like to hear more about what Alison is talking about. Thanks. I just thought I'd mention that.
That's fine. We should probably wrap it up. I know we did go over a bit, and
There's one.
I just thought it was too important to skip out on this information. There have been a couple links that have been dropped into the chat. I put a couple links. Andrew Fox dropped a link from ATTRA, Pictorial Guide to Hedgerow Plants and Beneficial Insects. I hadn't seen that one. That one is interesting. And I would, for anybody that's interested in ecological agriculture, try to get any of the ATTRA publications. You can find them on some other sites. I think archive.org has some of them, or they might have almost all of them, but they're around different places. Anyway, a lot of really good content. I hope we can bring something back within the USDA like that promotes ecological agriculture. That's really important that we break out of the spray regime world. But anyway, thank you so much, Alison, for today. This has been awesome. We're going to have you back at some point. And like you said, compost teas, or we can go into or we could talk about orchard fruits just specifically, or vines just specifically. But this was really wonderful. I hope everyone stays tuned here, coming right up in a short amount of time. I know we have a shortened buffer now, but that's okay. Helen Athro is going to be talking about actually about ecological orcharding, a no-till, no spray, selective weeding, grow your own fertilizer system for organic orchards. I hope you all can join. And I would like to acknowledge our sponsors one last time. On behalf of NAFEX, we have One Green World, which has been a wonderful sponsor for us for the last 3 years. And use the promo code NAFEX, all caps, for 10% off at checkout if you're interested. Also, Copenhagen Farms and Nursery, they produce good apple and pear rootstock. Go check them out. And Southern Cultured Orchard and Nursery, who is Larry Stevenson's operation down in Mississippi. And he is a wonderful wealth of knowledge. He would probably have been on this conference, but my understanding is he's traveling right now with his wife in Spain. And so once again, this recording will be made available at nafex.org under the members section. And then after a year, it'll be made available on YouTube. And again, don't forget to check in on our keynote speaker coming up here in just a few minutes. So thank you on behalf of everybody, and take care. Bye.
Thank you, Chris. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.